All right. This was attempt number 3,574. All right, looks like everything's stable on my 3 feeds. I'm live here on Facebook, on Periscope, and I'm live on, of course, YouTube. What do you know? How about that? So I'll send out a quick tweet here. Bad driving and climate change. They're not mutually exclusive. Okay. Well, actually, they are mutually exclusive, but it sounds like they're not, doesn't it? So I'm going to throw one more post up here on the Patreon thing as I am speaking, just to let you know I've got something I need to get off my chest regarding bad driving. And I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change because, of course, tomorrow is the first day of fall. Live on YouTube. Okay, so we are live, and I'm sitting here in my studio, talking into a microphone, looking at my computer screen, praying that this works. And so, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about 2 things. I'm going to talk about climate change. Tomorrow's going to be the first day of fall, I do believe. Fall comes in, and the sun crosses the equator at exactly 2 p.m. Mountain Time, September the 22nd, 2017. The other thing I'm going to talk about first, though, is something that I want to get off my chest. This is something that's brand new, and it happened to me this morning. After dropping my child off at school today, I was driving around past my child's school, through the school zone, and outside my child's school is a crosswalk, one of those with the button on the pole and the lights above the road that flash to signify that somebody wants to cross the road. And I saw who these 2 people were, so needing to turn right, of course, I signal to turn right, and I stop. Everything's fine. The 2 children, who are obviously on their way to school, start crossing the road in front of my car, which is, again, exactly what they were meant to do. This is how it is done. This is how you do it. You do it calmly, you do it safely, you do it intentionally. And then all hell broke loose. I looked into my rearview mirror and saw this car coming up on my left-hand side. They slowed down just a little bit, and then they proceeded to keep going. And of course, yours truly, seeing the disaster that is impending, puts his fist on the horn. The 2 children, of course, jump out of their skins. I almost have a heart attack because I'm thinking these 2 kids are about to become red smears of jello on the road. And the blind idiot just proceeds on through the intersection, oblivious to the fact that he almost killed 2 children. I'm very glad that these, and I hate to say this, but I'm very glad that these 2 children weren't mine. I'm very glad that these 2 children are still alive. But this goes to show just how stupid people can get when they're behind the wheel. And this is, sadly, a common occurrence around my child's school. People don't think. They pass each other in the school zone. They stop in the middle of the road to let their children out of their vehicle. They run out from between cars to cross the road without looking. And those of us behind the wheels with any sense of self-preservation and preservation for ours and others' children are almost scared out of our wits to drive through this area for this very reason. So please, 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 if you are driving through a school zone, anywhere near a school, for God's sakes, please slow down. Watch for kids. Think about what you're doing. The last thing that any of us want to see is a dead body of a child on the road. It's not going to do you, the driver, any good. It's not going to do any of us, the parents, any good. And it's certainly not going to do the dead child any good, because nothing's bringing them back. And you are going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. And I don't think you or anyone else wants that. So that's my rant, so to speak, on driving. You know, there's a show on TV called Canada's Worst Driver, and if it wasn't so frightening, it would be funny because of all the stupid things that you see people do on the show, and it just makes me shake my head. And what is even more disgusting and sad is the fact that most of the winners of the show, Canada's Worst Driving, if you can call it winner, come from Calgary. Some people think I deserve to be on that show, but when I see the driving around, like, I'm not the best driver in the world, I admit that. But when I see this, the antics that go on around my child's school, I just think, my God, every single one of these, we should have this show called Calgary's Worst Driver. I think about half the city would be on the show as a qualifying contestant. All right, rant over. If you want to say something about that, please do leave a comment. You can find me on Patreon. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube. Please like me on Facebook. Like me on Twitter. Like me on YouTube. Find me on Patreon. I'm also on Minds.com and Gab.ai. At SC Britton, Britton. On most of those places. The Facebook page is called Steve Speaks Freely. Or Steve Speaking Freely. Steve Speaks Freely. I can't even remember the name of my own page. So there you go. Now, switching gears. Climate change. And this is a very apropos discussion because we've got the Paris Accord. We've got the dead Kyoto Protocol. We've got the usual suspects all screaming and yelling about how the world is dying beneath our feet and how Mother Earth is going to protect herself any way that she can. We had Al Gore telling everybody just recently how right he was. Where in actual fact, if he had been right, none of us would be here to see his new movie. Which is what I find so funny. Nobody, let me back up here. Nobody that I know of or whoever is actually denying that the climate is changing. Of course it's changing. The climate always changes. The only constant thing about the Earth's climate is change. If nothing else, continental drift will force the climate to change. Hell, back in the time of the early time of the dinosaurs, 200 million years ago, all the continents were bunched up together in a supercontinent called Pangaea. And this, because everything was all bunched together, the ocean currents and wind currents and the mountain layout of all the mountains and stuff of the time meant that the most inner part of Pangaea, the supercontinent, was so arid and hot, it was virtually uninhabitable. Pretty much all the life around Pangaea lived around the coastlines, like this massive Australia kind of a continent. That was 200 million years ago. More recently, at the, around just before the year 1000 and leading up to around the year, 1300, We were in what was called the medieval warm period. The climate was so nice, and it was warmer than it is now, but it was so nice that people were growing vineyards in the UK and what became Britannia, like the UK. The Danes, the Vikings were all over the place with their ships. There was a place, mythological place called Vinland, which some people think is Newfoundland. And later on, of course, what happened? Well, we had the Little Ice Age. Crops in Northern Europe failed. People started to starve. The story of Hansel and Gretel comes out of this time with parents abandoning their children in the forest just because they couldn't feed them. So what's the point in all this? The climate always changes. And it's a long-term process. It happens over a long period of time. If you look at the time scales that are even presented to us by the IPCC, we're looking at over 100 years. Anything can happen. And so in 100 years' time, when all their predictions from now have been proved wrong, what are they going to say? Well, it's different now than it was. Well, of course it is. I still remember reading a Newsweek article back in the late 1970s about the disastrous coming ice age and how we were all going to be starving to death because our crops were going to fail. They didn't. Al Gore was predicting the polar bears would be drowning by now. They aren't. So what's the point? The point is this. We, humans, now, are animals. We are part of the natural fauna of the planet Earth. We are part of the ecosystem. So, and as part of the ecosystem, just like elephants, just like rhinoceroses, just like cows, just like grass, we change the environment just by being part of it. Yeah, we can build houses. Great. We can build cars. Great. We're tool-using species. Chimpanzees are tool-using species. They use tools to extract ants from anthills. But the point that I'm making is, by our very existence, we change the climate. In fact, going back to how species change climates, the very first mass extinction in the history of the planet, which occurred more than 1 billion years ago, as far as I can recall, it was the Great Oxygenation Event, when anaerobic bacteria, which ate whatever the gases of the atmosphere at the time were, I think it was mostly carbon dioxide, and they excreted oxygen. The result was the Great Oxygenation Event, which killed off almost all of them and produced the next phase of the evolutionary process. Now, I'm not saying extinction and our extinction or an extinction is a good thing. I'm just saying this is what happens over time. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? If you listen to the IPCC, the climate is going to get warmer. And by the way, global warming does not cause earthquakes. Whoever thinks that global warming causes earthquakes is an idiot. That's a sidebar. But the IPCC says the Earth is going to warm. Okay, fine. The Earth is going to get warmer. And then the politicians all get in on the act, and they start looking about how they can get votes out of this and how they can do something about it. And a lot of the solutions that the activists will tell you they want is to move money around. Now, I don't know how moving money around is going to change or mitigate or fight or reduce the effects of climate change. I think all that moving money around is going to do is make people in the developed nations poorer and make people in developing nations larger producers of greenhouse gases. So the questions are, what, if anything, should we do about it? I'm thinking what we should do about it, instead of moving money around, is accept the fact that it's going to happen over time and research ways of reducing our output. And a lot of companies do this. There's Tesla, for example. Now, that's not perfect because you've still got to generate the electricity to charge up the batteries of something like the Tesla vehicle. And and how do you charge? How do you get electricity? Well, you burn gas, you burn coal. So you're still going to produce greenhouse gases. It's just not going to be coming out the tailpipe of the vehicle. But there's that. There's always increases of fuel efficiency. These are all good things. But just simply stopping driving and using the bus isn't going to make a huge impact. Stopping the use of wood stoves, maybe, or burning coal to produce electricity, that's not going to help. What are we all going to do? Live in the dark? You know, like these activists, they want us to go back to the Stone Age, I think. So, what's the solution? Be aware. Reduce where you can. Live your life as you see fit. And as the ocean's sea level rises, it's going to mean that people are going to have to move inland. And it happens. It is a natural process. And there realistically is nothing, ultimately, that we're going to be able to do about it. Now, that seems defeatist. That seems very pessimistic. But the fact is, I really don't believe that our use of resources is going to change anytime soon, because I don't believe that there is any real desire for anyone here in the world to revert back to living in an agrarian, hunter-gatherer style society. Now, if you want to, that's totally up to you, and I'm not going to stop you from going out and finding a cave somewhere and living out your life as a hermit off the grid. But there's no way in hell I'm going to. So, over time, we'll adapt, we'll change, we'll figure it out, as we always do. And Mother Earth will keep on living going about her merry way, and the environment will change and do what it does. So, there you go. That's it for me. That's my comment. That's a bit of a commentary and a rant for today. If you like what you hear, please do like this video over on YouTube. It's very appreciated and it helps me. If you want to help me out financially, it's not a requirement for these videos and audio shows, but it's very much appreciated. You can give me $1, you can give me $5 a month, you can give me $10 a month over on Patreon. You can give me nothing. That's up to you. I'm also over on Minds.com. You can seek me out there. And of course, I've got the page on Facebook, Steve Speaking Freely, or Steve Speaks Freely. You can like my page. And there you have it. So that's it. That's 10:30 a.m. Calgary time. And I will not be on the air tomorrow because I've got a meeting at my child's school with my child's teacher. So we'll be back Monday next week. That's going to be an interesting week because it's Free Speech Week. I'm going to probably be talking a little bit about cultural appropriation. I'm sure that's going to come up at least once. I'm going to talk a bit about, on one day, I'm going to talk about identity politics and how all identity politics is fascist. So we've got some interesting stuff coming down the road. And that's it, that's all. Again, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Patreon. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Periscope. You can find pretty much anywhere. In most places, it's at SC Britain. That's going to be minds.com. That's going to be Twitter. That's going to be... what's the other one? Patreon. And over on Facebook, Steve Speaks Freely or Steve Speaks Freely. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.